If you have any interest in the spiritual side of therapy and the energy side of recovery, then you're going to enjoy the interview today with Doug Hilton. Doug Hilton has a master's degree in counseling psychology from the University of Calgary in Canada and has been practicing as a counselor for more than 20 years. He is also a certified Universal Healing Tao instructor, and he is certified in the emotional processing method of EMDR. He practices in British Columbia, and there are two books that we were going to get into, the main one being The Tao of Addiction and Recovery by Mantak Chia and Doug Hilton, a Taoist guide to recovering from addiction, with easy-to-perform Chi Kung practices to aid with recovery. The authors systematically explain the nature and development of addictions, the process of recovery, and how the Tao Te Ching can provide guidance. With Taoist emotional recycling, they show how to heal stuck emotions and addresses the urges and attitudes that often cause relapse. And of course, Doug also talks about EMDR and the Universal Healing Tao. I really believe you're going to enjoy this interview and Doug's wisdom. All right. Let's get to the interview. And today we are welcoming to the Intentional Clinician podcast, Doug Hilton. He has been a counselor for over 30 years, like I discussed earlier, in British Columbia. And we're talking about his new book that he wrote with Mantak Chia, and that is The Tao of Addiction and Recovery, Chi Kung Practices for Restoring the Energy Flow in Mind and Body. Thanks so much for being here, Doug.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So you've been a counselor for so long. Have you always been integrating sort of Eastern thought or practices into your practice, or is this something relatively new for you?
My master's thesis was about polarities, which is rooted in Taoism. And so that was sort of my theoretical introduction into it. But my actual formal education with Master Chia started in 2003. So still quite a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And just something, being a therapist, I'm curious, do clients come to you because of this sort of niche that you've learned to help people with? Or do they come to you for all sorts of reasons? Or, okay, go ahead.
They come to me for all sorts of reasons, but most of them are coming to me by word of mouth for this kind of a practice and this kind of work, because like on the surface of it, a lot of the things that I do probably wouldn't necessarily make sense to people to the point where they'd look at the website and go, oh, that's the guy for me. Mm-hmm. But like moving your eyes and that sort of thing, why should that make such a difference? But when they hear it from somebody who matters to them, that's different. So that's how I meet most of them.
Okay, excellent. So a lot of word of mouth and people coming to kind of hear that. And I know that you do EMDR as well. And so do you integrate EMDR also into your practice?
So the first book that we wrote together is called EMDR and the Universal Healing Tao.
Yes.
And in that book, we were merging EMDR with some of the Qigong practices and creating something new. And that practice is also described in the second book. So we call ours TER, Taoist Emotional Recycling, but I like to acknowledge EMDR because, of course, that had a big influence on what we did. And that is most of what I do these days, that technique.
Okay, excellent. Well, just for the people that may be tuning in that don't know too much about this, but might have been interested by the title of the episode, can you explain a little bit about Chi Kung, especially, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So Chi kind of is energy, bioelectromagnetic energy inside the person, or just electromagnetic energy around us. And Kung is work. So like people know Kung Fu, right? Mm-hmm. That's martial arts work. This is energy work. So within that broad category, that umbrella of energy work, there can be all kinds of different practices done sitting down, standing up, laying down, on the ground, kind of like yoga, or moving like Tai Chi. There's healing without touch, healing with touch. It's a big category that covers a whole lot of territory.
Okay, excellent. So, in a sense, translation is sort of energy work, and
Right.
it comes from an old tradition. Is that true?
Yes, the particular system that Master Chia teaches, the Universal Healing Tao, is more than 5,000 years old.
Okay, wow. And this is still practiced. Is it still practiced widely somewhere?
Yes. So Master Chia was given permission by his master
Mm-hmm.
to share these things with the West for the first time. And so I think in the early 80s, Master Chia started writing books and sending out information. At that time, he was in New York. And now he has his big center in Thailand. And he's still doing somewhat of a world tour, even though he's in his 80s now. And so he's in that field, he's well known, and the practices are now distributed worldwide.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the practices because, as a therapist in the Western world, the sort of, I don't know, trend, if you will, that's happening finally is the mind body idea, right? We can't
Mm-hmm,
just solve everything by thinking because
mm-hmm,
that's not how the brain works. And we understand that while there can be therapies that focus on thought and they can be a good start, oftentimes long-term results don't occur until people work with their bodies. And this is like obviously mind, body, and energy that you're dealing
right,
with, the flow of the energy through, because we are electromagnetic. I mean, these are things that a lot of people aren't taught as children. Um, and our heart is constantly beating, and if it lost its
right,
electromagnetic pulse, we would just stop beating and we'd be dead, right? So,
right.
so,
Yeah,
so I kind of want to give people a little bit more of a flavor of maybe. I know you said sitting up, sitting down, these sort of movements and Tai Chi. We've seen, people can look at that on YouTube and whatever, but
right.
what are maybe what's a practice from Chi Kung that it maybe is semi introductory that you could tell us about, just so people could understand what they're getting into if they purchase the book or decide to work with you or anyone else who does this.
Oh, sure. So you could start by just putting your feet flat on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
just so, at least in theory, then you're connected to the energy of the ground
Mm-hmm.
coming up toward you, right? And then put one hand on your belly button,
Mm-hmm.
and then put the other palm on top of that palm. So now you're not losing energy out of your hands either. You're kind of connected to the ground already.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you breathe, breathe both ways, in and out, through your nose, and slowly, slow enough that you don't hear any sound when you're breathing. And as you breathe in, just let your belly fill with air, not straining, but full breath. And when you exhale, just let your belly button fall straight back so that it's mostly your belly moving, not your chest. And you can feel your hands going with it. Focus where your hands are and just feel them going back and forth as you breathe slowly. And just let your body loosen. You don't need to hold anything if you're sitting down. Let your elbows drop and your shoulders relax and your jaw relax. Your eyes soften. Now that's one whole practice right there. How's it feel?
Well, I feel pretty relaxed doing that.
Yeah.
And there's part of my brain that was wanting to resist and think, no, focus on the interview. But then I started feeling into it and I thought, wow, that felt really good. And so maybe hopefully a listener at home was doing that, kind of just
Mhm.
focusing more on the body and the movement of the hands. And yeah, it's pretty simple too, something to do.
Yeah. And when you were doing that, did your hands feel warm?
Yes.
Yeah. We call that area where your hands were resting the lower dantian. like lower mind or lower elixir field, many names for it, but it's the major energy center of the body. If we pointed a thermal imager at you and recorded the energy movement like they do in the movies, with the night vision goggles and stuff, you'd see a big spiral right there. And it goes one way for men and it goes the other way for women. It's a real thing. And when you put your hands on it, your hands warm up. You might think, oh, I just had my hands on my body. Well, try on your own later. Put your hands other places, even your heart, and you won't get the same warmth that you got from right there. That's our major furnace. And then when you're breathing slowly like that, it's like bellows on a fireplace. You're adding a little air to the fire and letting it stoke a little bit, and then spiral stronger and bigger and spread through the body. And warm, soft energy, we relax. When we were doing that, what did you think about, Paul?
Well, I mean, I didn't have a lot of fast thoughts because you said slow down your breathing so that you can't hear yourself.
Right.
So I feel like then I was focusing on my breathing, trying not to hear myself, and just the movements. I wasn't really thinking of much besides, maybe I should do more of this, and then, oh, maybe you should make sure you ask Doug questions. So there was a few thoughts, but I wasn't really dwelling on any thoughts, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. Many people that come to see me, probably you too, they say, if I could just shut my brain off, boy, that thing is just going all the time. Well, with one little practice there, we got you to relax and just kind of shut your brain off a bit and to focus. Like, people want to concentrate. They want to get better at concentration. Well, here's an exercise where it's actually just built into it. You're not doing it to concentrate, but you can't help but focus in order to keep the breathing going, So anyway, this is a basic practice that we tend to come back to a lot in our system. We view that energy center right there as being very important, and trying to keep that fire stoked is a good thing for us to stay energized and relaxed and feeling well.
Very good. So it sounds like some of these practices are things people can do at home once they learn them, and then they can sort of, you're utilizing what I'm sensing, and I don't know if this is right, but tell me if I'm wrong, is that you're utilizing the practice to then start addressing some of the thoughts or worries after you've kind of got the person to a place where they're more quiet and grounded. Is that what I'm hearing?
We start with the body. That's right. And the body doesn't argue, really. Mine can argue a little bit, but not for long. And then from there, it kind of sets the tone. Sometimes people will really benefit from intellectual head sort of cognitive exercises, but other times they're so worked up that the first thing they need to do is just calm down. And then they can think. So we start there. And then the practices, as you can see, this is not an unusual example. They're simple. They don't require great flexibility or great coordination, and they don't require a special place, special clothing, nothing like that. So you're right. People can learn these practices, and that's the idea. Like, you don't see a lot of Qigong studios in your city probably, because it's not taught that way. We're taught to move the energy, learn how to move the energy on our own, and then go off and practice.
Okay, yeah, it sounds very down to earth and not really, like sometimes we have lots of yoga studios and exercise studios and everything, and that's important for people to have that space to kind of get away from their distractions. But I think sometimes they turn into like a larger business model, and maybe that's not what everybody needs. You can take it home, and that's a challenge to do that. So you'll do the movements of the body. Do you still use your psychotherapy techniques, or are you more focused on Chi Kung in your work?
Oh, I still include a lot of things. And that's sort of the Taoist approach. If you ever make a trip, or anybody does make a trip out to see Master Chia in Tao Garden in Thailand, you'll see that he has many different kinds of treatment modalities represented there. There's Ayurvedic medicine and Western medicine. And so one thing I like about the Taoist approach is that it's inclusive. We don't say, well, that's not the Tao. That's kind of against the definition of Taoism. Taoism includes everything. It's just making use of what works when. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, um, do you treat people remotely too, or is it more like in the space?
Remotely as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, so Taoism is that the overarching umbrella?
That is the spiritual system that's connected to it. It's not a religion. Now,
Right.
well, I guess there are some sects that use it as a religion, but we certainly don't. It's a spiritual belief system about how to work in harmony with nature. The sort of scripture, if you want to call it, of Taoism is the Tao Te Ching. And if you ever read it, it's not reading like what you would normally expect from that kind of material. It's talking about moving like bamboo and moving like water and how things flow to the bottom and it's working with the natural flow of things. That's all.
Hmm. Excellent. And so then this is something that you've discovered through your work here, and now you're bringing it to your clients through the therapy. And it sounds like the master has a place in Thailand where he's doing this all the time with different
Mhm.
practitioners and people helping people under them, and then also having these other types of medicine there as well.
Right.
um, so let's talk about some of the exercises in the book and how they might help people, because this book, you specifically are talking about the Tao of addiction and recovery.
Mhm.
And could you tell me what drew you to the addiction world? And I'm assuming you don't just mean drugs and alcohol, you mean anything you're addicted to. Is that
Mhm.
what you mean?
Mhm. Well, in my little town that I grew up in southern Alberta, there was, to me, addiction all around me. It was normal
Mm,
for people to drink a lot, smoke, do a lot of unhealthy things.
hmm.
And so I watched a lot of people that I cared about struggle with that kind of thing. And then uh, after I got finished university, I was just lucky enough that I was in a small community trying to get some experience, and a position opened up to work in addictions. And I thought, here's my chance to finally learn more about that because I'd always wondered.
Mm,
And so that was my introduction. I knew nothing really. And they were kind enough to help me. But then from there, I was noticing that I was hitting a limit lots of times with what I could do with people. Some of it, of course, was my lack of knowledge or experience yet, but some of it was just the limitations of what I was doing and the work that I could offer, the treatments I could offer. And so I was always searching for, okay, well, how do we do this better?
mm,
And when I discovered some of Master Chia's work, then I started thinking, well, this might work. When I went for my first long treatment retreat in Thailand with him, I noticed that some of the people there were in recovery and they were there learning those practices for that purpose. They had just realized on their own, hey, this could help me. And so they were right and it was working. So from there, I kind of made a mental note and decided I'm going to try to figure this out over time.
wow. Okay. So you sort of went on your own healing retreat. Is that what I was listening
Yes,
to? Can you tell
yes,
me are you okay telling me why you decided to do that?
sure. Like many people going into psychology, I went in to help myself. And
Mm,
so I had lots of um, problems that I was trying to work out mentally and physically.
yeah.
Physically, at the time, I had tennis elbow in both sides and didn't know. And I couldn't straighten up properly. I was in I think, my late 30s at the time.
Hmm.
And anyway, I went there hoping to help myself, but then ended up also learning that maybe I could use what I was learning to help other people.
Okay. Yeah. I love that. And you said when you were growing up, it was just normal that people were acting addicted, and I would agree with that. And living in
Mhm.
the U.S., and I lived in the northern part of the U.S., in Chicago and Michigan, in my childhood until I came to the Southwest and kind of lived there part of the year. But anyway, the point is that in that area, it was very normalized. In fact, it was almost seen as a badge of honor to drink alcohol,
Right.
and especially if you could hold the alcohol, meaning that you you weren't too drunk, but you also weren't sober. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Like,
does.
and so there's that, and we all know that that's sort of a fallacy, because eventually you're going to develop possibly an addiction to it, or it's going to hurt you in some way, right?
Right.
And cigarettes were kind of going out of style when I was a kid in the 80s, and people are going, oh, wait a minute, you shouldn't smoke anymore. It's actually really not good, right? And funny enough, if people have read any of this, we know that a lot of the companies affiliated with large tobacco started investing in indulgent food products, such as, an easy example being Kraft macaroni and cheese and things like these, which were food products made in factories that were quick and easy to eat and great for parents who are too busy to cook longer meals, or kids can make themselves, and ended up finding out that those have addictive qualities. And the newest kind of research, it's not new research, but finally mainstream research in the US is saying, there's a huge push to say, stop eating ultra processed foods, try to eat almost no processed foods as much as possible, because in the US, there's insane statistics about processed foods. So it's interesting how addictions can shift with culture, and sort of what's normalized can affect your average person who has no idea about what this is, because we were born into this. We were not, maybe 60,000 years ago, when there wasn't factories to produce food or something, and we were out on the plains eating, we didn't have much of a choice but to eat, raw vegetables and raw fruit and maybe cooked meat, right? Very simple, maybe some grains, as we've seen from history. But nowadays, we're fed what our family feeds us, and that's all based on culture, but also a lot is based on, nowadays, on marketing and speed, because not everything's the family cooking like it may be 120 years ago, where there was this emphasis on that. So I think it's interesting, because you deal with addiction, and there's the obvious drugs, alcohol, addictions, but food and lifestyle in a way can harm body and mind, depending on what's normalized. So I was just curious if you deal with any of that, or your thoughts from your perspective.
Yes. We call some of those process addictions, which sometimes gets mistaken to mean just a bad habit. And that's not what it means at all. It just means you're not putting a substance in your system. It might create a chemical effect that's just as deadly inside, but it's not originally coming from that source. So, and I worked with the problem gambling program here in BC for 25 years, worked with gaming. I work a lot these days somehow with sex addiction and porn addiction, but food addiction is a problem, shopping, internet. There's so many different ways that people can get addicted. A lot of them are very stimulating for dopamine flow, too much so, to the point where it can get to be virtually the same as cocaine on the inside in the effect on what it does to a person.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's the gamut. You just named the gamut. So in your mind, I see that you're working with people from all types of addictions, different things going on. And you mentioned dopamine. So obviously you understand that, the physiology as well on the inside. So in the book, you were talking about trauma, and you said that some people say that trauma is the root of all addictions. What's your perspective that you kind of see with that?
Okay, yeah. So thankfully, people like Dr. Gabor Mate, I'm not sure if I said his name right, but people like that, they realize now that there's such a strong connection between trauma and addiction. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's always a connection or that it's always the root, because like if you and I started meeting every week and just doing crystal meth together, eventually we're going to have a problem. It doesn't really matter what our history was,
Right.
But there is often a connection like that. The other area that I don't think gets quite enough attention yet that I try to talk about in the book is just about how can be, I'll call them stuck points. Not necessarily emotional events to the level of trauma, but they're places where people in their recovery from an addiction keep bumping into, and it keeps taking them back. Maybe it's an old pattern, something that they keep doing, meeting the same kinds of partners, or on some level, limiting their progress, these kinds of things. So I often treat not just what people would classify as trauma, but more just like events. Maybe on a scale from 0 to 10 in terms of emotional severity bothering them, it's a 3 or a 2. But if it keeps coming up, it's worth being dealt with too.
Yes, I'm glad you distinguished that, because I don't like the all or nothing approach sometimes that happens in the literature or podcast. Absolutely. Trauma is a contributing factor to addiction. But there's many reasons, like you said, like what if we were just hanging out? And that happens to some people. Like, for instance, when you're in, people in the early 20s often join social groups or go to college or something. And a lot of the social groups, it's sort of this peer pressure to drink or use drugs or do certain activities.
Right.
And some people, it's just a phase. They get caught up in it. They try it. They realize maybe this isn't for me. But other people can get trapped in it where all of a sudden it's like what they need to do. Right. And that didn't necessarily happen to do with a quote unquote trauma, but maybe just some adverse experiences, or just, the habit of something that was fun and now is an addiction where you feel like you don't have the power to stop. I was just curious about some of your clients or just your experience with addiction. How does the Chi Kung, practicing, is this something you want to practice every day? What are your thoughts on that and how it can help people in recovery from addiction?
Okay. When I worked in rehab centers, people often rebelled against the regime because there had to be a format that everybody had to go through. You can't individualize it for 50 people. We had 48 men in one place. And so people would often say, well, that doesn't work for me. I'm too tired. I'm too whatever. With this kind of practice, you can do it as much or as little as you like. It's just the more you practice, probably the better. And I like that word practice that Master Shia uses. It's not meditation, it's not homework, it's practice, because it implies what you need to do, which is just keep doing it until it becomes a lifestyle, like brushing your hair and brushing your teeth and those kinds of things. So that you're now doing these things, not always because, I'm having a problem, I should go do some Chi Kung now. That'd be a very difficult way to do it. You're just doing it because this feels good and you do it all the time, and you don't have to always be totally clear-headed about why.
Okay, excellent. So it's just a practice that feels good, and then once you get into it, it can kind of benefit people. And that's interesting because there was a type of therapy developed in New Mexico in the 70s and the 80s called community reinforcement approach, or adolescent community reinforcement approach in the 90s. And the emphasis of that program, which was related to motivational interviewing, and this is all talk therapy, this wasn't any sort of practice like this, was to, if you could help the person find more fun things to do and things that they loved and start putting that into their life somehow, and more of those happy, positive relationships, what happened over time was they just naturally stopped using as many drugs. Now, obviously, or alcohol, obviously we weren't dealing with heroin, right? If you have heroin or meth, we would want you to maybe get detoxed first, but this program could work for them too, because once people started finding satisfaction in certain activities and friendships, oftentimes the need for the substance reduced. So then you're adding this practice you can do on your own at home, which is empowering. So we're bringing the strength to the person, and it's not a difficult thing. It's I don't know if you guys, this is a Canadian thing too, but ever heard of CrossFit?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like these like intense training gyms or whatever, like a big trend in the US. But oftentimes people feel like, oh, well, I can't go to that. That's too intense for me. So what am I supposed to do? Right. So this is something you don't have to be a triathlete to do.
Right.
And it can be part of your life. And there's the physical component, but also obviously the mental component, because you're addressing the physical to get to the mind is kind of what you're saying. What about, I don't know, what's a part of these practices that you feel like really changed your life when you first started studying them, back when you first got into it?
Mm-hmm. In theory, we're not just working with the bioelectromagnetic energy in the body. We're working with what they call the meridians, the little energy channels that wiggle sort of top to bottom or bottom to top from the internal organs. And so a little different than the chakras that they focus more on, I think, in yoga, although I don't know much about yoga. But these are coming from the organs rather than down the center. And for me, that was a huge part of the benefit that I got from doing these practices, was that I could feel the benefits sort of reverberating through my body in various places. I had chronic pain for 23 years all through my spine, and I kept trying various things. It would get better for a while and then go away. And so I kept getting frustrated because I think I'd found the solution and then it would go away. Mm-hmm. But when I finally figured out how to move the energy through the whole body, through those meridians, in my case, particularly in the kidneys, then I had, when people go for acupuncture, they sometimes get a needle in one spot and they feel the reaction someplace else. It's the same concept. Anyway, I could then make the energy move through my whole body instead of a select targeted area. And that's how I managed to sort of put my physical and my mental health on a much better track.
Okay, excellent. So there are some elements with the meridians going into basically the practice of acupuncture.
Right. In Chinese medicine, there's the herbs, there's the needles, and there's Chi Kung.
Okay, excellent. And so the herbs and the needles, obviously, that's more passive. You're taking the herbs, you're letting the acupuncturist help you. And then Qigong is very much more active from the participant. Is that what I'm hearing?
True, yeah. And they're different too in what they do. They all have their own specialties. Like the needles are, if you want to pinpoint a particular spot that's got trouble, well, of course, the needles are great for that. Mm-hmm. But if you want to have the energy recirculated regularly, that would be really expensive to do if you were just going to an acupuncturist for it every time. But you can do it in Qigong all day long if you want.
That's true. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Let's talk a little bit about, obviously, we have this is an ancient system, right, and it's been going on for a long time. And so, of course, when these systems come into the Western world, the Western medical profession, which has a completely different perspective on the body and mind, often like to what I would call a piecemeal or silo approach instead of a holistic approach. They often like to kind of try to pick it apart and say, well, what evidence do you have to, it helps people, and how much can it help, and how, is it replacing medicine, or is it just something to kind of help people, prevention? What are your kind of thoughts on, obviously you're in the Western world bringing an Eastern traditional practice to people here. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course you're right. There's lots of that reaction in the world, but we all know that in a general way, when it comes to addiction, recovery needs to be better than addiction life. In recovery life, if you don't enjoy it more, what are you doing it for? And so it's generally recognized that when people do any kind of energy work in this way, Tai Chi or Qigong, any of that kind of stuff, they do feel better. And fortunately, in a lot of circles, formal, even government circles here in Canada, I don't know about the States, it's been recognized. Like we have, there's a particular protocol for addiction, for example, that's done with acupuncture, 5 pins in each ear and 2 on top of a person's head, that helps with reduce urges to use. And that is now not just acknowledged, it's included in a lot of government services that we have here because of its track record of keeping people away from their addictions. So the evidence is starting to mount.
Oh, I like that a lot. I do know in the States, acupuncture alone has been starting to get more veracity and accolades for pain relief.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in notably the Veterans Administration of the U.S., which is a highly traditional entity, was endorsing and having veteran soldiers go and get acupuncture for pain instead of opiates. So, which is I thought was a big improvement.
Right.
That being said, I don't know too much about the States in terms of is anyone using this for addiction. I did not know about those impulsivity points, and that is, I think, worth looking into, because the good news about the States is that acupuncture is readily available in almost every big city. I mean, there's acupuncture clinics. There's like, where in Phoenix, there's got to be 100 of them, and I know in Michigan, even in the big cities, there's not as many, but they're there and they're licensed, so it's available, and I think that's important for people to understand. This stuff is available, and it's been available. Honestly, it's kind of growing in popularity, but it's more of it's not always mainstream, I guess I would call it. Wouldn't always be on the regular television shows.
Yes, and kind of hard to pitch, because when it works, you feel normal. Right? So it's hard for it to catch on with momentum that way. But it is, I have a friend who's a doctor of Chinese medicine in the Lower Mainland, and she has that specific training in addictions for acupuncture for addictions. And I'm pretty sure she took that training in the States. So I think you have it there someplace.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'll just tell the listeners, check it out, look for it. I don't know where it is yet, but I'm big into that, because there's a lot of addiction centers, I think, that could utilize this for sure. So in terms of the Taoism, are these principles that you also teach alongside the Chi Kung?
It comes up in the talk aspect of therapy a lot, because it's not special language or special techniques. It's just recognizing what's real. Like when you try to make someone in your life do something that they don't want to do, they might dig their heels in. Right? And then you've got a power struggle. And so Taoism talks about those kinds of things in nature. And if you pull back too hard, sometimes you get a reaction in kind, and then how to work that out. And so it's very easy to work it into the conversation. And what I like about it is that it isn't I don't come across, I hope, as the expert with the big words. I can just talk to them like a person. When you're outside and you walk against the wind, the harder you walk sometimes, the worse it gets. That kind of thing.
Okay, I like that. So kind of like there's like some teaching philosophy. Like you said, the Tao Te Ching is a lot of not directive, but more following the ways of nature and little anecdotes, I suppose you could call them. I've read some of it, and it did seem very poetic and interesting to me.
Yeah, like that, and very able to kind of reflect on the paradoxes of life, which is a lot of what people get in other circles in addiction and recovery too. Like in the 12 steps, they'll talk about you have to let go to get control, or you have to surrender to get your life back, that kind of thing. And so I can draw upon Taoism because it speaks the same language to help people understand why those things are true.
Okay, I like that. I guess this is a question I ask authors, because you did, this was published on Simon and Schuster, right? Which is a rather medium to large publishing all around the world. Where did the idea hit you to write this book about addiction and recovery?
It really hit me when I saw one other person when I went for that first retreat in Tao Garden in Thailand. One other person was from the Lower Mainland, and he was there working on, his health, but he was also very open about the fact that he was in recovery and he was working on it. And so I was taken aback by that and really impressed with the results that I saw him getting. And so it just was like a seed that was planted from there.
Okay. Yeah. So, and it's kind of just inspired it. And then it was like, oh, well, I could write this for other people and put it out there for the public.
And it took, this many years, 20 some years, to be able to kind of gather enough expertise on my own part about how these things work so that I could actually feel confident enough to write a book to say, I think this is how it could help.
Well, that is a very wise way to go about it, because it's very difficult to explain a concept simply to people to be able to understand when you've studied it and you know so many ins and outs. So it's an important piece.
Mm-hmm.
What are, I don't guess, maybe some tips or ideas for people that want to get involved in Chi Kung, no matter maybe if they're a person who's dealing with addiction, or maybe they're a practitioner already, maybe just an average person who's just interested in wanting to add some healthy practices to their life? What are some tips that kind of can get people involved in the community?
Oh, sure. There are so many ways now, thanks to Mantak Chia. Master Chia has written, I think, over 60 books now, all through that same publisher. And so he's a big-time author, itemizing all of the different practices in that system. And for those people who have seen some of his books, they can probably nod in agreement right now that it's written with plain language, lots of pictures, easy to digest kind of material. So that's one way. Master Chia also has a website called school.mantakchia.com. And people can click on that and see all of the various courses that he's offered, and they are available by video. So what happens is you pay, and then you can watch it as much as you like after that. It isn't like on a time frame or anything like that. And there are short ones that are cheaper, of course, and then there are entire retreats that are there as well. So it's a lot like being there training with us. Whenever I went for one of the retreats, he always had staff there filming everything, and then they would take clips out of it and make videos out of it. So they're available that way. He has a lot of stuff for free on YouTube. Like I said, he still does somewhat of a world tour. And he has, if you go on to just mantakchia.com, you can see all the places where he's, all the times when he's offering online courses as well. That's a real cheap way to get in-person, or not in-person, but live training.
Right.
He is certifying people like myself and others as instructors when we're there. And so there are now thousands of us across the globe trained in these practices and able to offer the teachings. And so people can just look that up online, look for a Universal Healing Tao practitioner or an instructor in their area, and they'll find them and go learn from them in person if they're close enough.
Wow. Okay. So lots of, basically a lot of ways to get involved.
Oh, yeah.
You want to get involved.
Oh, yeah.
And I was looking, he's 84 years old. And he doesn't look very old in these photos.
No. And that's one of the things that sort of stands out for people who do that kind of thing their whole life, like he has. Chi is like air pressure in a balloon or in a tire. And so when we have lots of it, then it keeps the skin kind of pressed out and we don't fold in as easily with wrinkles and such. And yeah, so you might see old Qigong practitioners with, maybe they don't have much hair left and they may not have big arms or big legs, but they look healthy. They look young for their age.
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing thing. I love that you're bringing this into the West. And I was curious, this strikes me as something that may be a deeper question, but oftentimes in addiction, something's going wrong, or maybe we got into a bad habit and we need that quick fix. And so I could see somebody getting into Qigong and then kind of being like, I'm resting, I'm more relaxed, I'm doing this, and then maybe something else adverse issue happens in their life, and it's like, oh, how do I fix this? I was curious how the system of Tao or the Qigong could help someone who's kind of, in recovery, but then something bad happens to them, or something emotionally distraught?
Oh, yeah, it's a really good question. So all of the practices are helping people on all levels, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so they all have overlapping benefits, but each of them has its own specific sort of primary focus. So that's why there's so many different practices. They're for different things. And so depending on what the person is struggling with, they might need a particular practice. Someone who's looking for more feeling strong and confident, but without using cocaine to feel 10 feet tall and made of steel, they might turn toward the iron shirt Qigong practices, which tend to lend themselves in that way. Someone who's looking for more compassion might do the inner smile meditation. I'm just labeling things you probably don't know about, but there are specific
That's okay. Yes, this is good.
for each of these things. And the other thing I like about that system is that it does address a lot of things that are not easily or often addressed in other systems. Like we have specific practices for the bones and the tendons and the sexual organs. Sexual energy is often a very out of control mechanism in people's recovery lives. And so learning how to work with that energy and use it to your benefit is a big help. There's all kinds of different practices for different things. But even if a person was struggling, picked up the book that Master Shia and I wrote and picked any practice in there, it would probably help them a bit. Not as much of a quick fix as an addiction, but we don't want that.
Right. We don't want to go back to that. Yeah.
No, but better than my beef with some of the practices I was taught in other settings was that it seemed like we had to do one practice for every aspect of it. Here's one for here's something we'll do for depression. Here's something we'll do for anxiety. Here's something we'll do for trauma. Really, they're a package, And so one of the benefits, I think, of adding this kind of thing to the treatments that are already out there is that you can treat some of these things, treat multiple symptoms or multiple issues a bit at the same time.
Okay, I like it. Thus the holistic approach. So,
Right.
Well, I think you've covered a lot. I guess another question, and I guess maybe this is a silly question, but with this book, would you also say this book might be good for family members or people that know someone who's going through an addiction, that to maybe help themselves through the emotional stress of that?
Oh, that's a great question, too. And I'm really hoping that's the case.
Yeah.
So often people are what they call codependent. And it's a range, right?
Right.
But it's the idea that people are focused too much on someone who has an addiction. Well, who in us in our lives never comes across somebody who has an addiction? It's pretty much impossible not to do it now. And so it's important to know how to balance your own energy. Otherwise, you get it's an exaggeration, but kind of addicted to the person. Worrying about them, trying to help them, trying to control them, rescue them, all that kind of stuff. So the practices apply in that sense as well. When I've run groups in the past too, people have said, "Oh, I don't understand those addicts. Why don't they quit?" And I'll say, "Well, let's see you put your phone down for a day, or how about you stop drinking coffee?" Or some of them will go out for a smoke afterwards and don't think of that as an addiction either. The truth is, most of us are struggling with something. We overdo something. So I can't see how the material in the book would be totally irrelevant for anybody, really.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one of the first steps, of course, is awareness of an issue, right? And if we don't see something as an issue, well, maybe we're not ready to address it yet. And of course, in holistic medicine, I'm not sure if this is the same with Qigong, but the idea is that the symptoms are not something to be rid of, but the symptoms are something to explore and figure out, why do I have these symptoms, right? And we try all the methods, and then sometimes we ended up having to go to a doctor to figure out why we have these symptoms. But oftentimes we can tell why we have these symptoms, right? In the US now, I laugh when I don't usually like going to gas stations, but when I'm traveling, you go to them and go inside to grab something to eat or whatever. There's nothing really nutritious to eat, so I bring my own snacks. But I do notice this new trend, because I used to like to have unsweetened iced tea, which is almost impossible to find now. because everything's got sugar in it, which is addicting. And now, 25 years ago, there used to be like one energy drink. Like they're called they're these cheaply made sugar beverages with a ton of caffeine and taurine usually. Okay, I won't name them as for risking of getting some bad mail. But now, and that my latest traveling I did last month, I went to a gas station and they had an entire cooler full of probably 30 different of these cheap drinks. Not even just coffee. They weren't just coffee. I'm talking like extreme energy drinks. And I thought, I'm not saying people are addicted to those. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But there is an extreme need for energy. And as we know, energy drinks don't give you energy. That's false advertising. They appear to give you energy because you feel like you have energy, but they're actually blocking the parts of the brain that say you're tired and you need to rest. And I thought, wow, if this isn't just what we're swimming in right now, that's kind of what I felt.
Yeah, and to me, it kind of reflects something about our society that I'm hoping will shift over time, which is this whole emphasis on go, go, go and conquer, rather than the value of sometimes it's better to just take it easy and to rest and to recover.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well, because that's what nature does, right? That's why we have seasons. And even in the most extreme weather, there are seasons. And that's why the farmers used to let the fields kind of take a break for a year, right? And replenish their minerals and whatever. So we have decided to manipulate nature to do what we want, bad effects there. And if we don't follow the natural laws that we are seeing in nature to some extent, we have symptoms. And then we have used science, or in this case, beverage factories, to mask that issue. So, okay. So in terms of, your book and work, do you actually take clients, or are you just too busy for that these days?
Oh, I take clients. For sure.
Do? Okay. So you're still taking clients. Fullcirclehealing.ca is your main, is that your main website?
That is, yes.
And that'll be in the show notes. And Victoria, British Columbia. And of course, now,
can I mention another one?
What's that? Yes.
Can I mention another website?
Yes.
The other one I could mention is balancerehab.solutions, which is the rehab program that I'm going to be offering starting in June at the training center, Dow Garden, where Master Chia does most of his training.
Oh, really? So this is going to be out of the country? Out of where? Yes,
it'll be in Thailand, and it'll be 28 days at that program. So the material I'll be doing at that program, I'll probably take like a dozen people max, and I'll be doing a lot of the things that are offered in the book.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're getting together a retreat, basically. Okay. I'm trying to figure that one out. It was balanced.
Balancerehab.solutions.
Balanced rehab. Balanced or balance?
Balance, just with the E.
Okay, nice. Okay, and I'll put that one in there as well.
Thanks.
And then I guess this book can be bought pretty much anywhere books are sold, but you can always request your library get it, because it is on Simon & Schuster, obviously Barnes & Noble, Amazon, bookshop.org, which is a huge favorite of ours here, Inner Traditions. And obviously they can just Google, your name, Doug Hilton, and the Tao of Addiction and Recovery, and you'll find it. So,
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I always like to give you a last word. So is there anything that, you want to say directly to the audience that maybe you wanted to, mention to any sort of listener that could be listening?
There's a phrase in recovery, they say, contempt prior to investigation. And they're trying to respond to how people can sometimes prejudge things before they've actually tried them. And so I offer that phrase to help people remember that if they listened to this and or checked out the book and thought, I don't think that would apply to me, well, give it a try first. This is not the kind of thing that will just jump out at you logically and say, yeah, that'll work. It's the kind of thing you probably have to try to find out if it will.
Okay. I like that. So contempt before...
Contempt prior to investigation.
Contempt prior to investigation. So so this is one of those things to try out. And I will say that, on this show, I only take guests who I feel are authentically trying to bring something healing into the world, and they're not trying to sell a product. So I have no problems at all saying, buy Doug's book and Mantak Chia, who co-wrote it. Just buy it or go to the library, get it, whatever, and check it out, or check out their free stuff online. And I think, I love the idea of trying it out, not just prejudging. So I appreciate that, Doug.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
The sight of you left hooked me, and I went down. A feeling overtook me when I kissed the ground. Like I was reborn, with the flora and fauna, and the thickness of dawn. Into the brightness pushed me, and I wandered on, past the young signs that pulled me.
And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician Podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or share the show with people you know. I would surely appreciate it. As some of you know, I am passionate about preventing future violence in the United States. I have started a nonprofit with colleagues called the National Violence Prevention Hotline, which is a 501c3 organization. We are endeavoring to gain funding and collaborators and volunteers so that we can start a 24/7 hotline and chat line to reach potential perpetrators before they may act violently. It is a bold effort to curb violence and save innocent lives by working to connect with potential offenders while they are in the planning stages of violence, help to de-escalate them, and provide resources so that they can get appropriate professional help. The National Violence Prevention Hotline is looking to open up a conversation about violence in society, the causes, and the solutions. You can learn more by visiting our website at violencepreventionhotline.org. You can get involved by writing your congressperson from our website, sharing it with your network, or even donating to the cause. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am a consultant and I can help provide 20 hours that you need to become EMDRIA certified. Just check out the show notes and send me a message and see if we're a good fit to work together. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians at Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids as part of the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. And if you are in the state of Michigan, you can also schedule a telehealth appointment. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and the experience in their respective fields, the information on this podcast should not be viewed or thought of as the definitive opinion on any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you're in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Crisis Line at 988. Support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org. That's www.bookshop.org. It donates a percentage of sales to local bookstores all across the United States, which I think gives character to our cities and a place to hang out and a place to explore. You can order from the comfort of your own home online while supporting businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not involved in your local counseling or therapist or social work organization, please get involved to at least pay dues so that we can have lobbyists help keep mental health care accessible at the government level, and also expanding into schools and other places that need it. And also, if you didn't know, counseling organizations and professional organizations are working to keep us from becoming gig workers for a lot of large corporations who are coming in and trying to buy up local counseling agencies or basically pay you what they pay for people to deliver food to your house. So get involved. Until next time on The Intentional Clinician, I wish you all a safe and peaceful week.